She looked me in the eye and said, "I don't want a dress from some woman who lived off her husband's money pretending it was love. Stop performing." Then she tore the wedding dress I made with my own hands, right in front of 200 guests, 6 months, every stitch done in silence, and she shredded it like trash. I stood there, no screaming, no tears, just silence so sharp it burned. I wasn't ready for that kind of betrayal. But what she didn't know was this. The dress hadn't the only thing I brought that day. And before the night ended, something else would be torn wide open. The music didn't stop. That's the first thing I remember. After everything that happened, after the sound of silk ripping in a room full of silence, the background string quartet just kept playing. Sweet, soft, stupid. I remember the look on the violinist's face. Confused. His bow just kept moving. And me? I stood still. I didn't reach for the fabric she'd torn from my hands. I didn't say her name. I didn't ask why. I already knew. There are moments in life that don't come with a build-up. No warning signs, no dramatic pause. Just one clean slice that leaves you open in places you didn't know you could bleed. That was the moment she gave me. My daughter. She stood on that stage, wedding gown pristine on her body, but rage rising in her voice, and she said it. Loud, clear, like she'd been rehearsing. "I don't need a dress from some woman who lived off her husband's money pretending it was love. Stop performing." Then she tore it. Not the dress she wore, but the one I made. The one I had carried to the venue, boxed in satin, pressed, folded, protected like a sacred thing. The one she once told me made her feel like a queen. She took it from my hands, in front of 200 guests, and shredded it in the same second she shredded my name. It took her less than 10 seconds to undo 6 months. People gasped. I saw someone drop a champagne glass. My ex-husband's sister put her hand over her mouth like she'd seen someone get shot. My old friend Felix, who'd organized the event, stood near the floral arch with both hands frozen mid-clap. And still, the music didn't stop. It kept going, as if the cellist and violinist and pianist had decided this was part of the show. Maybe it was. Maybe I'd been part of a show for 32 years without realizing it. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. My hands stayed at my sides. I turned and walked off the stage. My heels echoed against the marble floor of the side hallway. Every step sounded like a sentence. By the time I reached the prep room behind the venue, the one they'd given me to rest and refresh during the reception, I was already rolling the lock shut. The room was too white, too clean, like nothing messy was allowed in, but mess had already come. I sat down, not slowly, not dramatically, I just sat. My bag was on the couch where I'd left it earlier that morning, tucked neatly under a shawl. Inside it was the folder, the one I'd had drawn up 3 months ago. I took it out, laid it on the vanity in front of me. The penthouse in Lakeview, the 47% ownership stake in the Laura Whitlow brand, the scholarship trust for young designers that I had hoped Bianca would someday manage. All of it, neatly itemized, ready to be signed. The pen was still clipped inside the flap, and I hadn't signed it. Not yet. I looked at my reflection. Not the makeup, not the earrings, not the carefully arranged chignon, just the woman behind the woman. My hand hovered over the pen, then dropped. Not because I was unsure, but because suddenly I knew something for sure. She didn't tear the dress to hurt me. She tore it down because she thought I would never fight back. That was the part that hit me hardest. The betrayal wasn't just in the insult, it was in the calculation, in the way she made her move when I was at my most exposed, when I was doing what mothers do best, giving. I had given her everything. And still, she wanted more. She wanted it all. And now, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't interested in protecting anyone. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't call a friend. I didn't ask anyone what to do. I just sat with the facts. The dress was ruined. The moment was public. My silence would be taken as weakness, again. And yet, I had not signed that document. I had not given her my name, my business, my home, my trust. That was still mine. That was not shredded. Not yet. To those of you listening, you ever watch someone smile in your face while quietly planning how to erase you? That's what this was. And in about 24 hours, I would learn that my daughter wasn't just cruel on instinct. She was strategic and stupid enough to leave a trace. I didn't sleep that night, not because of heartbreak, not even from the humiliation. It was something quieter than pain, and colder, a kind of stillness that made every hour stretch, the kind of silence that doesn't want comfort, just space. I sat in that hotel room for hours. The walls felt too polished, too beige. The couch was stiff. Even the lamplight seemed artificial, like nothing in that room had ever seen real life. The dress was gone, torn to shreds and collected by venue staff, probably now in a trash bag behind the reception hall. But the folder was still here, the folder with my entire life inside it. I laid it on the table in front of me. Again, same contents, same weight, same decision. It had been printed 3 months earlier, notarized, checked, rechecked. My signature line at the bottom was still blank. I had planned to sign it during the reception. Quietly. Hand it to my lawyer first thing Monday. The symbolism would have been subtle, but powerful. A mother letting go. A new generation rising. Legacy, handed over not just with words, but with trust. And now I couldn't make myself touch the pen. It wasn't indecision. It was clarity. I knew what had to be done. I just needed a minute to let my heart catch up to my hands. Around 2 in the morning, there was a knock at the door. Soft, controlled, no urgency. I knew who it was before I opened it. Gianna stepped inside, coat still buttoned and hair slightly damp from the night air. She looked at me the way only someone who has known your deepest pride and your worst regret can look at you. Not with pity, with knowing. I didn't speak. She didn't ask. She saw the folder on the table, sat down, took her gloves off one finger at a time, then finally said, not loud, not dramatic, just firm, "You didn't sign." I nodded. Her eyes stayed on mine, steady. "Good," she said. She didn't need more explanation. That's the thing with old friends. They don't need the details. They feel the fracture. She poured herself a glass of water, then looked back at me. "I always thought Bianca admired your strength," Gianna said. "Now I think she mistook it for softness." "That's on her." I leaned back. My bones were sore. I felt 73 all at once. But my mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in years. I said nothing. But I opened the folder, flipped through each page. Slowly. Each line of ink was a contract waiting to be broken. Every clause designed to protect the one who now thought nothing of slicing me open in front of 200 people. The penthouse, the shares, the scholarship fund. It was all here, and it was all mine. Still, I closed the folder again, set it aside. Not in anger, just with finality. A few hours later, just as dawn crept across the hotel windows, Gianna had dozed off in the armchair. I sat with my back straight, watching the light shift across the carpet. Then my phone buzzed. An email. No subject, no sender name I recognized. But the first line of the preview froze me. You don't know me, but I owe you something. I opened it. No greeting. Just a video file attached. Under it, one sentence. You helped me get through law school. I never forgot. The initials at the bottom were simple. JK. I downloaded the video, pressed play, and there she was. Bianca. In a boutique conference room, one I didn't recognize. Sitting across from a lawyer I did recognize. His name was Roman Pierce. Younger, sharp, always pushing lines. She was talking. Calm. Confident. Too confident. I heard my name. I heard hers. I heard the words transfer, paperwork, notarized without her knowledge. Then I heard the worst one. Power of attorney. She was planning to fake it, to get me to sign under false pretenses. She was already 2 steps ahead, as if my consent was just an inconvenience to be handled quietly. Then the final blow. She laughed. She actually laughed and said, "She'll sign anything if I cry hard enough." I paused the video. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady. Because now I wasn't in the dark anymore. I wasn't just hurt. I was informed. I walked over, touched Gianna's arm gently. She woke instantly, looked at my face, and knew something had changed. I handed her the phone. She watched in silence. No interruptions. When the video ended, she exhaled slowly. "So that's what this is," she said. "Yes," I answered. "That's what this is." I went back to the table. The folder was still there. I didn't need to sign it anymore. I needed to burn it. But not just the papers, the entire performance. Because now I had something far more valuable than a transfer of assets. I had proof. And proof, handled properly, could destroy an empire built on appearances. Bianca had torn my gift to her in front of the world. Now it was my turn. And I wasn't going to do it with a scream. I would do it with a screen and a spotlight. The morning after the wedding didn't begin with a sunrise. It began with a knock. I had just stepped out of the shower, hair wrapped in a towel, robe cinched tight. The folder was still on the table, closed now for good, but I hadn't moved it. I didn't need to. It no longer mattered. Gianna opened the door. She was dressed in black, not mourning, just focused. She carried her laptop, her phone, and something in her eyes that reminded me of the way we used to walk into boardrooms. Purpose, sharp and measured. There was no need for pleasantries. She sat, opened her laptop, and asked what time the brunch began. I told her 11. Bianca had scheduled a farewell brunch for the family and VIP guests. It was supposed to be her soft landing, her curated last word. Champagne, mimosas, a last parade in front of the sponsors. It was also the perfect place to give her something back. I handed Gianna the flash drive I'd copied the video onto. She didn't ask how I'd done it. I hadn't slept much. I didn't need to. My mind had worked overnight in silence. Every click, every step, every choice, made with the same steadiness I used to design my most complicated gowns. Gianna loaded the file. We checked the audio. We tested playback. No glitches. Then she called someone. A woman named Paula, a tech coordinator for the venue. I didn't know her well, but she'd worked with Felix for years. Professional, efficient, discreet. By 9:30, Paula had joined us. She didn't ask what was on the file. She only asked for the cue. I gave her a timestamp. Not at the beginning of brunch, not during the toasts, just before dessert. When the attention would be high, the mood light, and Bianca's guard at its weakest. She nodded once. No fuss. After she left, Gianna looked at me. She said this would change things. I said they were already changed. We didn't need to rehearse. We didn't need to prep a speech. All I had to do was show up. By 11, I was dressed, dark navy, nothing flashy, simple heels, hair pulled back. No makeup beyond what I needed to not look like I'd spent the night plotting the end of a legacy. The venue was buzzing, waiters with trays, soft jazz playing, cameras flashing. Bianca was already there, greeting guests table by table. She had changed into a cream silk dress, minimal jewelry, that fake air of humility she wore like perfume. I watched from the back. She laughed a little too loudly, hugged people a little too long. Even her eyes were performing. I saw Felix standing near the entrance. His mouth tightened when he spotted me. I walked to him, slow, steady. He leaned in, told me Paula had the cue set. All he needed was my signal. I gave him a nod. Nothing more. I didn't sit. I didn't mingle. I stayed at the edge of the room, sipping coffee that had gone cold in my cup. At 12:23, Bianca took the mic. She thanked everyone for being part of the most beautiful day of her life. She thanked her team, her planner, even Felix. But not me. Not once. She raised her glass, said something about beginnings and love and community. Then she said, "And now, a special little video, a surprise tribute." That was my cue. Felix stepped forward, tapped the control. The room darkened, the screen behind her lit up, and the performance ended. There she was, Bianca, on camera, sitting in that boutique conference room, her voice cool, sharp, certain, talking about my assets like they were hers already, walking through plans to mislead me, explaining how she'd forge a document I hadn't even signed yet. Then came the sentence. "She'll sign anything if I cry hard enough." The laughter that followed wasn't from the audience, it was from her, on screen. And in the real room, no one laughed, not a single soul. The silence was thick, sharp. I had heard that silence before. It was the same one I'd carried all night. Now it wasn't mine anymore. Bianca turned, slow, her eyes wide. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Someone at the next table gasped. I saw two of the sponsors exchange looks. One woman stood up and walked out. Another checked her phone, then gathered her things. Bianca tried to speak, but Felix had already killed the mic. There was no saving it now. I walked forward, not rushed, not angry, just certain. I didn't speak to her. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned to the crowd, the friends, the relatives, the investors. I held up the folder. "This was going to be hers," I said. Then I dropped it into the waste bin beside the stage. That was it. No theatrics, no explanation, just truth, presented without apology. The crowd didn't clap. They didn't need to. The moment didn't call for noise, it called for clarity. And that was exactly what I gave them. When I turned to leave, I didn't look back. Bianca remained frozen, standing in front of a room that no longer believed in her. Whatever empire she had built on charm and polish had cracked in less than 2 minutes. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just walked into the daylight. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like anyone's mother. I felt like myself. The day after the brunch, the story was already out. Not on gossip sites, not through some scandal blog. It travelled faster than that. Quietly, professionally, like a shift in the air. The kind of shift that makes people stop returning phone calls. The kind that makes sponsors reconsider their investments. The kind that doesn't need to trend to ruin you. Gianna had told me to expect it. She said, once the video was seen, the silence would do the rest. And she was right. I didn't post anything. I didn't give a statement. I didn't try to explain myself. I had said what I needed to say by doing nothing but showing the truth. Still, That morning, the silence felt different. Not empty, cleansing. I sat in the corner of the hotel cafe, same dark coffee in front of me, same napkin folded too neatly in my lap. But my hands were calm. No trembling, no shaking, just still. Across the room, Felix walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. His role had ended the moment the last guest stepped out of the ballroom. But he saw me, and he walked over. He didn't say much, just nodded, sat across from me, and took a sip of his own drink before setting it down. Then he looked at me, steady. "She tried to call me last night," he said. I asked if he answered. He shook his head. "I'm not surprised," I said. "She only calls when there's something left to lose." He didn't laugh. He didn't disagree. Felix had known Bianca since she was 12. He'd seen her grow from a child clinging to the hem of my runway gowns to a woman who had long since stopped asking permission. And though he never said it aloud, I think he once believed in her more than I did. Now he looked tired, not from the event, from the truth of who she'd become. "They're already pulling the Paris deal," he said. I nodded. I figured. The Paris deal was a campaign Bianca had been planning for months. A luxury skincare brand was going to make her the face of their North American launch. There had been talk of TV spots, magazine covers, even a limited fragrance edition named after her. That was gone now. One video, one truth. That was all it took. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel anything close to triumph. Just quiet confirmation. Felix reached into his coat pocket and slid something across the table. An envelope. I opened it slowly. Inside were 3 letters, all handwritten, all from people I hadn't spoken to in years. The first was from Elise, one of my oldest seamstresses. She had retired 5 years ago, moved to Arizona to live near her grandchildren. She wrote that she had seen the clip, that she wept, watching it. "Not for me," she said, "but for what it meant, for how far we can fall when we forget the hands that raised us." The second was from my former assistant, Monica. She thanked me for not staying silent, said she showed the video to her own daughter, as a warning and a lesson. The third was from a woman named June. I didn't recognize her name at first, until I read the second line. "You probably don't remember me," she wrote, "but 20 years ago, you gave me a ride home in the rain. I was the intern who got stuck after the gala. You told me never to apologize for taking up space." She ended with one line. "Last night, you took up the right space." I closed the envelope and placed it in my bag. Felix stood. "You reminded people of who you really are," he said, "and who she really is." Then he left. I sat there for another hour, let the coffee go cold again, didn't mind it this time. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Gianna. Her voice was clipped, direct. "The inquiry is open," she said, meaning the Office of Adult Protective Services had officially opened a case. Bianca's behavior at the wedding, combined with the video, had triggered a review. It would be slow, maybe even quiet, but it was real. Gianna said they'd be reaching out to Bianca's firm, to former colleagues, even to me, though I had no more interest in testifying. I had done what I came to do. Now it was her turn to answer questions. That night, I returned home to Chicago. The penthouse was clean, too clean. Bianca had sent someone to prep it before the wedding. The fridge was full of almond milk and sliced fruit I didn't eat. There were fresh white roses on the table. A card that read, "Welcome back, Mum." I tossed it in the trash. Then I opened the balcony doors. The city lights stretched beneath me, quiet and blinking. Everything below looked small, manageable. I stood there for a long time. let the cold air move through me. Inside, my phone buzzed. It was a message from one of Bianca's former clients. "Hi, Lorraine. I just wanted to say, thank you. Nothing more. No explanation." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some things don't require applause. Some things are their own conclusion. And I was finally reaching mine. 2 days after I returned to Chicago, I took the elevator to the top floor of the Whitlow building for the first time in almost a year. The last time I was here, I was handing over my keys to the board and telling them I was done. No ceremony, no goodbye party, just a quiet exit through the side staircase. This time, I wasn't here as the founder of a fashion house. I wasn't here to design or consult or approve color swatches. I was here to make something disappear. The woman at the reception desk, new and nervous, stood when she saw me. She must have recognized me from old press photos, or maybe just from the way I carried myself. She asked if I had an appointment. I said no. I told her to call upstairs. 5 minutes later, the head of operations met me at the elevator. His name was Carter. Young, crisp, always in a suit one size too tight, as if he was trying to make himself look larger than he felt. He led me into the boardroom without asking why I was there. Maybe he already knew. The entire company had seen the clip by now. I could feel it in the way people avoided eye contact in the hallway. Respect mixed with caution. We sat. He offered coffee. I declined. I pulled out the folder. Not the one from the wedding. A new one. Thinner. Simpler. This one contained a single page. It was a formal withdrawal of all future brand licensing under my name. Effective immediately. No extensions. No negotiations. The rights to my signature line would revert to the company, but only for archival use. No new releases. No tribute collections. Nothing further printed, sold, or celebrated under my name. Carter read it twice. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. I stood. I shook his hand. And I walked out. That was the end of Laura Whitlow, the brand. But it wasn't the end of the name. That same afternoon, I visited Gianna's office. She had already cleared her afternoon calendar. Her team had a separate file waiting for me, one with a new name on it. The Whitlow Foundation. Registered, structured, funded, focused on supporting women over 60 who had suffered emotional abuse from family members, with a special grant stream for women who had been financially exploited by their own children. Gianna went over the basics. I let her talk. The truth is, I wasn't listening to the numbers. I wasn't thinking about impact reports or annual statements. I was thinking about the letters I had started receiving, dozens of them. Some were emails, some were typed. But the ones that shook me most were handwritten. One woman wrote about her daughter draining her retirement account without her knowledge. Another said her son-in-law had moved into her home, then threatened to evict her unless she signed over the deed. One letter came from a woman in Kansas who had sold her engagement ring to help her daughter start a business, only to be blocked from the building once it became successful. These were not strangers. These were mothers. Women who had given and given until they forgot how to hold anything for themselves. I recognized all of them, because once I had been one of them. Gianna asked if I wanted to chair the foundation. I said no. I didn't want to be its face. I wanted to be its start. That evening, I took a cab across town. Not back to the penthouse, not to a dinner. To a small studio space I hadn't stepped foot in for almost a decade. It was dusty, cold, still smelled like linen and glue, and the hint of old perfume in the air. This was where I started, the original Whitlow studio. Before investors, before branding, before the boardroom. I unlocked the back room. the place where I used to keep scrap fabric. The walls were still lined with shelving. I found the corner where I had tucked away one particular box, marked only with my initials. Inside it were the remnants of dresses that had never made it to the runway, pieces too personal to sell, swatches embroidered with names that never got announced, the kind of fabric that doesn't go out of style because it never went in. I sat on the floor, opened a second box, found the remnants of the wedding dress Bianca had torn. I hadn't thrown them out. I couldn't. They were clean, pressed, stacked neatly, folded by a staff member who probably didn't know what had happened to them afterward. I ran my fingers over the lace, the beadwork, the silent work of months. Then I pulled out the shears from the drawer nearby. One by one, I began to cut each piece into long, even strips. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I was making something new, something not meant to be worn, but shared. By midnight, I had 12 fabric bands, each one sewn with a line of hand-stitched thread in a soft slate grey. Each one read the same thing: "You are not invisible." I placed them in individual boxes, no logos, no notes. They would go to 12 women I had already chosen from the letters, the first recipients of the Whitlow Fund's inaugural gesture. Not for press, not for show, just for dignity. And in that studio, with scissors in my hand and dust in my hair, I realized something. Bianca had tried to wear my name like a crown, but names, real names, carry weight. And sometimes, the only way to keep yours is to take it off the shelf, strip it down, and start again. The music swelled as the main course was served, the clink of silverware barely masking the rising buzz of alcohol and laughter. Bianca was in the center of it all, radiant in her second dress of the evening, a sleek satin piece designed to hug every inch of vanity. Her laugh floated through the hall like nothing had happened, like she hadn't ripped her own mother's heart out hours earlier. I sat in silence at a table near the edge of the room, a seat they thought would humble me. My dress was clean, simple, pale blue. No makeup but a soft red lip. I looked like someone's grandmother who had wandered in from the garden, and maybe that made it easier for them to forget what I used to be. They thought I came to give blessings. They had no idea I came with evidence. I waited until the toasts began. The best man stumbled through a half-hearted speech. A bridesmaid read a poem she clearly didn't write. Bianca held her wine, smiled graciously, and dabbed fake tears from her cheeks. I stood. My chair scraped the floor with a clean, cold sound. The microphone was unattended. No one noticed at first. But the second my voice came through the speakers, clear and steady, all forks dropped. "I wasn't planning to say anything tonight," I said. "But since I made the dress she destroyed this morning, maybe I have the right." Gasps scattered like birds startled from a tree. Bianca froze. Her jaw stiffened, the corners of her mouth twitching to hold that social smile in place. "You all saw her tear it. But what you didn't see," I continued, "is what she did weeks before today." I pulled the small remote from my pocket and aimed it toward the screen behind the band. A projector flickered to life. Lights dimmed. The video played without sound at first. Bianca, sitting in a leather chair. Next to her, a man in a grey suit. Her lawyer. The video had a timestamp, the name of the office, the logo clear. Then came the audio. Her voice. "She'll sign anything if I cry hard enough. Just make the paperwork look normal. I need the penthouse and the Lakeview shares transferred by June." A rustle in the room. Someone stood. Others whispered. "It's time she gave me something for once." Bianca's voice rang again. "I'm tired of pretending to love that woman." I let the video play to the end. 37 seconds. That was all it took. I stepped back to the microphone. I was going to surprise her today, I said. I had the legal documents ready, the penthouse, the fashion house shares, and a private scholarship fund in her name. All ready to sign. All gone now. Bianca stood, finally. Her face had lost all colour. "That video is fake," she said, voice cracking. But no one looked at her. They were watching me. The woman who had built everything, survived betrayal, and now stood calmly in front of 200 people, tearing down the illusion they had helped create. I turned to the side and handed a second envelope to the attorney standing at the edge of the room. "These are the papers nullifying any prior transfer intentions," I said. Effective immediately. Bianca rushed toward me. A few guests stepped in, gently but firmly stopping her. Her new husband looked between us, confused, betrayed, cornered. His parents whispered to each other, their eyes cold now, calculating. "And finally," I said, "the scholarship will still exist. But it will carry a new name, not hers. It will honor women who have been discarded by their daughters, who stitched love into every hem and got spit on in return." The room fell into stunned silence. I walked off the stage without waiting for applause. Behind me, the DJ hesitated. Music returned faintly. A few guests clapped, unsure. A table of older women nodded slowly. Another man patted me on the arm as I passed. I didn't look back. In the hallway, I paused, took out my phone. A message had arrived 5 minutes earlier, from the paralegal I once mentored years ago, the same one who had sent me the video. All she wrote was, "You were always the one with grace. She forgot that." I put the phone away, stepped into the cool evening air. Back in the ballroom, Bianca stood on the stage alone, dress slightly wrinkled now, makeup melting at the corners of her eyes, surrounded by empty glasses and half-eaten cake. The lights above her flickered, then dimmed, just like her spotlight. The silence after the collapse of Bianca's wedding was louder than any scream. The lights dimmed, the guests dispersed, and the once glittering hall now felt cold and echoing. I didn't linger. I walked out with my back straight, past the tables still littered with untouched cake and half-drunk champagne flutes. My heels didn't click angrily against the marble floor. No, they whispered of control, of clarity. The next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. It was my lawyer, Madison, her voice calm but urgent. Bianca's legal team had responded within hours of the video release. She denied everything, claimed it was deepfake, said I'd doctored it, that she was framed by a jealous mother incapable of letting go. I told Madison to proceed, quietly, precisely, and legally. By noon, an injunction had been filed to block Bianca from accessing or altering any financial accounts or properties tied to my name, or Laura Whitlow Holdings. She wouldn't be able to touch the penthouse, the brand, the scholarships. Not a cent. That afternoon, I had the locks changed. On every property, offices, home, storage units, the Lakeview penthouse. I arrived at the penthouse before sunset. The security guard nodded when he saw me. I didn't ask if Bianca had tried to come. If she had, she would have found the elevators disabled by keycard. I walked to the window overlooking the lake. The city glowed below. Everything I had built, every stitch of my life was still standing. I brewed tea in silence. The same chamomile blend I used when Bianca was little. She used to call it golden water. She would sit on the kitchen stool, feet swinging, telling me her dreams. That memory didn't bring tears. It brought a calm sadness, the kind that doesn't scream, but breathes in slowly. That night, the media began whispering. Blogs picked up the clip. Former employees of Bianca started leaking stories. Whispers about her methods, her treatment of interns, rumors about her pressuring suppliers. Nothing illegal, but everything ugly. The court of public opinion moved faster than I expected. By morning, Bianca's name was trending for the wrong reasons. A call came from our board. They requested an emergency meeting. Not with me. With her, she didn't show. Instead, she tried to go live on social media, her voice shaking, blaming trauma, blaming the pressures of being raised by a famous mother, saying she cracked under expectations. But the audience was unforgiving. They didn't see vulnerability. They saw manipulation. Comments flooded in, some cruel, most blunt. The tide was turning. By the third day, 3 of our largest retail partners had suspended collaborations involving Bianca's designs. And Madison informed me quietly that a former paralegal from Bianca's lawyer's office had reached out. The same person who sent me the video anonymously. They were willing to testify if needed. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. Like dust was finally being swept out of corners I hadn't dared examine. The house felt different, not because anything had changed, but because something had been released. Like a tension I'd carried in my spine for years without realizing. Late that night, I found a letter slid under my door. Bianca's handwriting, tight, shaky. She asked to meet, privately. No lawyers, no cameras, just her and me. At the old cottage on Hemsworth Road, the one where I used to take her on weekends when she was young, where we painted birdhouses and made pancakes. I didn't respond immediately. I waited 3 days. I let silence speak first. On the 4th day, I drove out. The cottage looked untouched. Same creaky steps, same wind chime that clinked like laughter. She was already there, sitting on the porch swing, not in designer clothes, just jeans and a sweater. Her hair pulled back. For a second, she looked like the girl I raised, but I knew better. I sat down across from her. I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch. She broke it first, apologized, said she didn't know what came over her, blamed stress, her husband, expectations. I listened, but I didn't react. I kept my face still. Then she said it. That line. I don't need a dress from a woman who drained her husband's fortune and pretends to care. Stop performing. Hearing it again, in that space, with her voice small and cracked, didn't soften it, it sharpened it. I leaned in, not to comfort her, but to make sure she saw my eyes clearly. I told her I heard every word. I told her I carried them like stones in my coat. Heavy, cold, and real. She asked if I'd ever forgive her. I said forgiveness wasn't owed, it was earned. She nodded, eyes rimmed red. We sat in silence again. Then I stood. I told her I hoped she found her way, but not through my doors. I left her there, on that swing, in the twilight. As I drove back, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me I needed to see anymore, only the road ahead, and the version of me I had reclaimed. Not a mother, not a martyr, not a victim, just a woman who finally said no, and meant it. I did not return to the penthouse that night. I didn't even stop to think of what to pack. I left everything behind except my dignity. I stayed at a small inn just north of the city, tucked between the lake and the old trail where my husband and I used to walk during the early days of our marriage. It was quiet. No one there knew who I was. No headlines, no whispers, just silence and the hum of wind moving through pine trees. That first morning, I watched the sunrise from the porch and felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, no victory, just space. And in that space, I began to breathe like I hadn't in years. My phone had long gone silent. Whatever storm had hit Bianca, it had turned inward now. I spent 2 days alone, walks in the woods, black coffee, staring at the ceiling. And then I opened the envelope. Not the financial documents. Not yet. It was a letter, one I had written to myself months ago, in case I ever lost sight of why I did everything I did. I read it again. You gave love in silence. You gave her a name, a legacy. But you were never required to give yourself away completely. You are allowed to walk away, even from your own child, especially when love is turned into a weapon. That line held me, especially when love is turned into a weapon. The next morning I called Martina. She answered on the first ring. Her voice, calm and grounded, held no urgency, just presence. She had been fielding calls from reporters and brands who wanted statements. Bianca had already lost 2 major endorsement deals. Laura Whitlow's stock had dipped. The board had issued a notice to review Bianca's position. The press kept calling it a meltdown. Martina called it a reckoning. I said nothing. Martina paused. They are offering you full reinstatement. The board wants you to return, reclaim full control, publicly. My first reaction was no. I had spent my entire life building that brand. But walking back now, after such an ending, felt hollow. I told her I'd think. Instead, I drove to the Laura Whitlow flagship store. It was still early, not open yet. I walked around the block, watched the windows being washed, mannequins being dressed. People rushing past, unaware that just days ago, the woman behind that logo had been humiliated in front of 200 guests and the entire internet. And yet the brand stood. Inside the building, one of the senior designers saw me. She opened the back door. She didn't say anything, just nodded. And I stepped in. The air was thick with the scent of fabric dye and faint perfume. I had been here so many times. Every rack, every fitting room, every sketch pinned to the wall. But this time, I didn't look at the dresses. I looked at the people. Some looked away, ashamed. Some held their breath. And a few, the ones I trusted most, nodded at me with quiet recognition. Not pity. Something else. Resolution. Back in the car, I drove without thinking. Past the courthouse, past the lake, to a small building where my old accountant still worked. He greeted me with a hug. I handed him the full set of documents. We sat down. I want to restructure everything. Nothing goes to Bianca now, nothing hidden. I want every asset to be publicly reassigned. He blinked, but nodded. Years of loyalty meant he didn't ask why. The penthouse, the shares, the scholarship fund. I had him reroute them all. To who? He finally asked. To a new foundation. In my mother's name. For women over 50, who had been pushed aside by their families, or who wanted to rebuild their lives with dignity. Especially those in the creative fields who had been told they were too old, too irrelevant. I had once dreamed that Bianca would carry on that legacy. But now, it would go to women who understood the cost of silence. We spent hours sorting the details. His pen moved with precision. My chest felt lighter. Later that evening, I sat at the inn and wrote the press release. It wasn't long, just a single paragraph. After careful reflection, I have chosen to step away from the public face of Laura Whitlow. My legacy will continue, not through one person, but through a community of women who have earned their place at the table. The brand is not an inheritance, it is a responsibility, and I choose to give it back to those who know how to carry it. No press conference, no interview, just the quiet assertion of autonomy. When it published the next morning, reactions came quickly. Some praised me, some accused me of abandoning family. But the most powerful response came in silence. Dozens of women sent private notes, stories of being erased, overlooked, ridiculed, and how my letter reminded them that starting over was still possible. Bianca remained silent. There was no apology, no explanation, just a void. I didn't chase it. 3 days later, I met with the board. I handed in my resignation in person, shook hands, walked out. No one stopped me. That night, as I lay in bed, I looked at the ceiling and whispered something my grandmother once said. Sometimes the loudest rebellion is to live well without permission. And I did. I slept, peacefully, for the first time in years. Outside, the wind moved through the trees again. No spotlight, no stage, just air. And my name, no longer attached to anyone else's expectations. Tomorrow I would begin again, not to prove anything, not to recover anything, just to live. By the time the gala arrived, I had learned to sit with the silence. Not the kind of silence that comes with loneliness, but the kind that follows storms, when the wreckage has settled and the sky dares to turn blue again. My name was still on the guest list, printed in gold ink beside the word honorary, though I had not RSVP'd. They had invited me out of obligation, not respect. I planned to attend anyway. The event was held at the Sterling Museum downtown, a building Bianca used to call stuffy and outdated. Now she had it strung in silk drapes and false elegance, like she was trying to rewrite history. The moment I stepped into the foyer, the temperature of the room shifted. Eyes tracked my steps. My dress, plain black with a grey shawl, stood in stark contrast to the sequins and curated glamour around me. I wore no makeup. I didn't smile. Bianca spotted me from across the room. Her lips curled into something that wanted to be a grin, but came out as a smirk. She looked radiant on the outside, but the cracks were visible to me. The way her fingers twitched, the nervous glances toward the press booth. She hadn't expected me to come. That was her first mistake. The second mistake was putting her name on the award. The Women's Initiative for Creative Impact was something she had tried to claim in the months after her public disgrace. I had let her run with it for a time, curious to see how she would carry it. She branded it with buzzwords and bright colors. She gave speeches about resilience. She collected checks. What she didn't know was that I had filed the foundation's incorporation papers under a different structure months before. It bore my signature, my governance, and a clause that allowed for revocation of all her privileges based on misconduct. That clause would come into effect tonight. I took a seat near the back of the stage while she was called to the podium. Her voice, always trained for optics, carried easily. "This initiative," she began, eyes flickering toward the camera crews, "was born from a desire to give back. I stand here not only as a designer, but as a daughter, a mother, and a woman who believes in second chances." A polite applause followed. She continued, thanking donors, speaking of strength and redemption. The usual. Then I stood. The moderator at the side looked confused, but I nodded toward the projector tech. He recognized me. We had spoken an hour earlier, and he knew what to do. The slideshow behind Bianca stuttered. Then the screen blinked black. And then came the video. It was grainy at first. The camera had clearly been hidden, likely a phone tucked into a bag. Bianca sat in a cafe booth, leaning in close to a man in a grey suit. "She'll sign anything," Bianca said, swirling her drink, her voice casual. "If I cry hard enough, she'll think it's reconciliation." The room went still. Bianca turned around slowly, her face drained of colour. Her hands gripped the edges of the podium. For a moment, no one breathed. The video continued. Just need that power of attorney slip. She's got assets wrapped in LLCs, but her lawyer's old. One visit, one sob story, and I'll have full control. Gasps, whispers, then silence again. I walked forward. The lights dimmed slightly as I approached the stage, the sound of my heels echoing louder than expected. Bianca didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. When I reached the podium, I took the microphone from her hand, slowly, firmly. I spoke without raising my voice. The foundation Bianca speaks of is indeed real, but it does not belong to her. It never did. Murmurs. This initiative, born of a lifetime of work, of mistakes and lessons, is governed not by brand, but by principle. And the principle is simple: integrity, or nothing at all. I nodded to the tech booth. The projector changed slides. Paperwork appeared on screen. The original documents, the governance structure, my signature, the clause of revocation, a digital timestamp, a statement from the legal board. It was irrefutable. As of this moment, I continued, Bianca is no longer associated with the Foundation in any official or unofficial capacity. All rights, appearances, and permissions have been revoked. The initiative will continue, but it will do so in service of those who remember where they came from. I stepped back. Bianca's voice broke the silence, but it was no longer polished. You planned this. I nodded once, not in cruelty, but in clarity. You taught me to plan. Security didn't need to escort her out. She left on her own, though not before being followed by a dozen camera crews. Her designer heels clicked unevenly on the marble as she fled. The room did not applaud. They simply watched. Some lowered their eyes, some stood. A few walked over and shook my hand. Later that night, I sat in my car and watched the live stream replay on my phone. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I had loved her once. I had dreamed of legacy and memory. But what I had built was never meant to be inherited without honor. She had not just rejected me, she had tried to erase me. And now, her name would be the one forgotten. I walked into the room that had once been my studio, a place filled with sketches, threads, and dreams. The table was cleared now, every paper stacked neatly as if it had never known chaos. But today, the chaos had already unfolded, and it was just the beginning of Bianca's unraveling. The press conference was about to start in less than 15 minutes. I sat quietly at the edge of the room, glancing over the final statements my attorney had drafted. Everything was in place: the revised trust papers, the transfer records, the security footage, even the emails that Bianca had so carelessly sent to her lawyer, thinking I was too old and too blind to protect what I had built. The video leak had already begun circulating online. My assistant had quietly sent it to a few key fashion bloggers and industry watchdogs. It wouldn't take long. Bianca had betrayed me with confidence, but she forgot that I had loyal allies who never once sought my money, just my kindness. I looked out the window, the clouds low and heavy over Lakeview. This was supposed to be the happiest week of her life. Now she had become a cautionary tale in every executive circle that once admired her smile. Just a few hours earlier, she had been radiant, posing in front of our family estate, smiling for cameras, hugging friends. Knew nothing of the storm she had stirred. But when I stepped onto that ballroom stage and handed the mic to the woman who once worked as my junior seamstress, the room froze. Her voice was steady as she told them how Bianca approached her to backdate a dress design contract that never existed. How Bianca threatened her, then offered $5,000 to lie. And how she had recorded everything. I didn't have to say much. I let the facts speak. Bianca had tried to frame me, the very woman who had once spent sleepless nights sewing samples to save the business when banks turned us away. Now the silence in the room that followed the reveal was heavier than any judgment I could have voiced. She had used her fiancé's family connections to pressure board members. She tried to wrestle voting rights that never belonged to her. And she had made one fatal mistake, assuming I had no fight left. My lawyer arrived with a folder. Inside were the termination letters. Bianca's directorship was officially revoked. Her personal accounts linked to the brand had been shut down, the corporate cards frozen. The penthouse access was denied. I didn't take away her last name. She was still my daughter. But I had removed her clause from my legacy. My staff didn't say much. They didn't need to. When I returned to the hallway, I saw the interns lining the corridor, heads lowered in silent acknowledgement. Some of them had looked up to Bianca, not anymore. And as for the investors, they didn't back away. Instead, they pulled me aside. One said he had always admired the core of the brand, ethics, strength, and elegance. Another said his wife cried watching the video of me holding up the unshredded half of the wedding gown, torn in rage but still beautiful. I told them the truth. That gown was never about a wedding. It was a symbol, a mother's hope that her daughter would walk toward a future with grace. Bianca had destroyed the fabric, but not the intent behind it. As evening fell, I drove back to the lake house, not the penthouse, not the brand headquarters, just a small, cedar-framed retreat where I used to hide when the world overwhelmed me. Tonight, I wasn't hiding. I was reclaiming space. My phone buzzed. It was Martin. He had taken over the post-conference communications. I trusted him. He had no interest in limelight, just truth. Bianca hadn't called, not even once. But she had sent an email. I didn't open it. I wanted silence. Instead, I walked to the lake's edge and tossed the locket she had given me last year. A locket with our photo that now felt like a lie. It sank slowly, swallowed by still water, as I stood unmoved. I thought about forgiveness, whether I owed her that. But some actions couldn't be soothed with words. They had to be confronted. And sometimes, distance was the only boundary that preserved dignity. Inside the lake house, the fire was already lit. My assistant had left a note beside a warm cup of tea. It simply read, "The board voted unanimously. They stand with you. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to exhale. Not in triumph, not in sadness, just in quiet." Bianca's name would not be erased, but it would be remembered for what she chose to do. And me, I would not be remembered as the woman who was humiliated at her daughter's wedding. I would be remembered as the woman who stood up and reclaimed her place. This chapter of the story was not about destruction. It was about exposure. And what came next would require strength of a different kind, a quieter strength. But I was ready. I didn't have to say a word that morning. When I walked into the ballroom where the last brunch of the wedding weekend was being served, a silence rippled across the crowd. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was the unsettling awareness that something was coming, and I carried it with me like a storm behind calm eyes. Bianca was already seated at the head table. Her gown, a second backup bought last minute after the original was ruined in her tantrum, clung to her like a desperate attempt to salvage grace. But even the most expensive silk could not hide the wear of a sleepless night. Her husband-to-be, Troy, was seated stiffly beside her. He did not reach for her hand. I walked slowly past the tables, making no effort to acknowledge the stares. I went straight to the platform and tapped lightly on the microphone. No music, no announcement, just the raw sound of a woman who had swallowed betrayal too many times and finally decided to let it burn its way out. "Last night," I said, "I had a dream. But it wasn't made of flowers or white veils or a mother's wishes. It was a recording of a meeting of my daughter and a lawyer, talking about forging my signature to transfer assets I built with my own hands and mind. And her words were so precise, so rehearsed. She said, "She'll sign anything if I cry hard enough." I paused. You could hear cutlery drop. No one moved. I glanced down at Bianca. Her face was frozen, but her fingers twitched near the napkin. She knew what was coming next. Behind me, the projection screen came to life. A brief video clip played. Bianca, sipping wine, laughing too confidently, then turning to the man beside her and sliding a document across the table. The audio was clean. She won't read it. She's sentimental. All I need is the right setting. Gasps erupted. A woman near the back placed a hand over her mouth. A man whispered something to his wife. Troy stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on Bianca as if seeing her for the first time. I turned back to the microphone. "This is not about revenge," I said. "This is about clarity." I had once planned, as a gift of love, to sign over the penthouse in Lakeview, the Laura Whitlow shares, and the education fund into my daughter's name this morning. I had carried those documents in my purse for weeks, hoping, believing. Today, they will be destroyed. From my bag, I pulled out the thick envelope. Without breaking eye contact with Bianca, I held it over the ceremonial flame set on the side for candles. The paper caught fast. Flames licked up the edges, swallowing years of good intentions and maternal blind faith. The room erupted. Some stood, unsure whether to intervene or applaud. Some stayed seated, shocked into stillness. But the roar in Bianca's ears must have been deafening. She lunged forward, pushing past Troy, knocking her chair aside. Her voice, high and cracking, screamed across the room. "You planned this, you sick old witch. You wanted me to beg." I stood there, calm. For once I felt nothing. No rage, no sorrow, just the strange release of a chain being unshackled. I turned to the crowd. If you've ever mistaken silence for weakness, take note. Then I left. I didn't look back. Later that afternoon, the legal cascade began. Bianca's scheme was forwarded directly to the family's longtime attorney, who immediately issued a statement to freeze any legal changes regarding the company shares and property allocations. The digital file of the meeting had already been reviewed. Fraud, intent, collusion, words that taste like iron. Troy's family issued a formal statement disavowing any prior knowledge and called off the marriage. His father, a federal judge, made a private visit to my home later that day. He offered no apology for Bianca's behavior, only a silent nod that said more than words ever could. He had seen enough to know where the fault lay. News traveled fast. Within 48 hours, Bianca was removed from the board of 3 charitable foundations where she served as a figurehead. Sponsors pulled out. Clients cancelled contracts. The media picked it up. From darling debutante to manipulative heiress, the fall was swift and public. But none of that was the point. The point was, she had tried to cut out the heart of everything I had built, with no remorse. And now, the world saw her without the costume, without the performance. For the first time in decades, I sat alone in my garden, no phone buzzing, no meetings, no tension in my shoulders. I drank tea. The wind shifted slightly. The air felt clean. Sometimes you have to burn what you once nurtured, not out of hate, but to protect the part of you that still knows how to heal. And in that quiet, I knew the hardest part was over. But the real conversation with her had yet to begin, and it would come. But this time, not on her stage, on mine. I didn't expect to cry at my daughter's wedding, but I did. Not out of joy, but because it was the end of a story I had been rewriting in my head for years. That morning, I dressed in silence, placed the legal folder into my leather handbag, and walked into the ceremony with a quiet heart. The room shimmered with flowers and glass and gold. Bianca was radiant. She had everything she ever wanted, including the spotlight. When the time came for speeches, I stood, calm and steady. I began with simple words, thanking everyone for being there, for loving my daughter. I glanced at Bianca, expecting a smile, but her eyes narrowed. Before I could finish my sentence, she stormed up to the stage, yanked the microphone from my hand, and shouted into the crowd. She spat venom, word after word. She called me manipulative, claimed I leached off her father's money, that I was a fraud who sewed a wedding dress just to parade myself around like a saint. She called me a woman who took everything and gave nothing but guilt. Then, to right there and here, she ripped the dress I had made for her, the same dress I had worked on for 6 months. Her nails tore through the delicate lace like it was tissue, and then, as if that wasn't enough, she shoved me, hard, until I fell against the edge of the stage. The room froze, my palms stung, my breath hitched. My daughter, my only child, humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. For a moment, it was quiet, unbearably quiet. Then I rose. I didn't speak. I didn't retaliate. I simply walked off the stage and out the side door. What came next wasn't rage. It was clarity. As I sat in the dressing room alone, shaking, an anonymous envelope slid beneath the door. Inside, a flash drive. A note. You should know what she's planning. I opened my laptop, plugged it in, and watched. There she was, Bianca, 3 weeks earlier, sitting across from a lawyer I had never met. Her voice was clear. She'll sign anything if I cry hard enough. I just need the right moment. The lawyer looked uncomfortable, even asked if this was legal. Bianca smirked. She won't even read the papers. She's old. She wants to feel needed. I closed the laptop. I felt the air leave my lungs. She had been planning to forge a signature, to steal the penthouse, the brand, the scholarship fund, all of it. Everything I had spent a lifetime building. I thought I was passing down a legacy, but she saw it as loot. By the time the reception started, I had already contacted my lawyer. The document in my bag, the transfer of $4.3 million in property and assets, would remain unsigned. The scholarship fund would be redirected. And I had made a decision. I returned to the ballroom, not to make a scene, but to reclaim my dignity. I let her have the spotlight. I let her believe she had won. But when the final toast was called, I took the stage once more. This day is about love, I said. But it is also about truth. And sometimes, truth must be spoken to set us free. Then I played the video. The room gasped. The screen went dark. Bianca's face turned pale. Her new husband backed away slowly. The fallout was immediate. Her lawyer resigned. Her husband annulled the marriage within days. Friends vanished. Sponsors for her boutique pulled out. The press got wind. She lost everything she had schemed for. Weeks later, she came to my apartment. No makeup, no fury, just a hollow girl in heels too big for her soul. She didn't say much. Neither did I. But I saw it in her eyes. Regret, shame, fear. I didn't forgive her that day. That would come later. But I saw a sliver of the girl I raised, the one who used to laugh at my studio as I sketched into the night. I saw a chance, maybe, for both of us to start again. I moved to a quiet town outside Portland. I reopened my workshop, not for profit, but for joy. I teach young women how to build something of their own, not just from fabric, but from self-worth. I am not broken. I am not bitter. I am beginning again. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, I hope my story reminds you that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the choices we make after the pain. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this touched something in your heart, you're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, healing starts here.